Matters, were you part of the single integrated operating plan, then the PSYOP? Were you given a target and then you and your nav would plan that in a booth on your own and you would be familiar with that? Can you describe that process?
When I arrived in late '94, you have to realize that the wall was already down for 5 years. So that part of the mission had pretty much vanished. And I think up until something like 92-ish, I would believe, they still had Victor Alert with four ready-to-go aircraft in a special separated area on the base with 24/7, 365 QRA. But that had already gone by the time I showed up. And the mission set that we were employed in was called cell use, selective use. So if we were tasked, and obviously we exercised that numerous times during the year, both in a national capacity and also in a NATO exercise from SACEUR. You were usually tasked with something in the neighborhood of 10 lines per wave. And they were, as the tasking was coming in, they were individually planned mostly the night before the execution.
Oh, really?
And then you were given, and the mission planning section produced a target folder like they used to fly in the F-104. They always had books with their standard routes, and those same things, they were produced for these cell use lines. And then if you were coming in as a flying crew, you were briefed on your specific line. You were briefed on other lines that were a direct factor for yours as far as other detonations go, conflicts. But I would reckon maybe at least 95% of the picture you didn't know. You knew your own line, your own routes, your own numbers, because there is so much going on. All the strike wings, they operate at the same time. The nuclear submarines, the Tomahawks, the IRB, you name it. Everything is going eastwards at the same time. So I always thought, there's no way this is going to work. How is this supposed to work? If there are literally hundreds of explosions, I only have two eyes. So I can cope for two nuclear yields and then I can go TFR, but we would have several EMPs by that time. So more than likely that's not going to work either. So I thought this whole thing is pretty idiotic.
You didn't have a way. It's interesting. There's a couple of clips that I put out recently that relate to the things you talked about. I did a JP233 clip from an RAF guy in Granby, and I also did Marco McCaffrey talking about F-111 strike, nuclear strike, and he was talking about in the F-111. You know, they had the silver their curtains, I think, that they can
Yeah.
put down, and there's a panel you can put up here. And he said there was a little peephole so you could look out if you wanted to. You didn't have a similar
No,
thing then,
no, no.
and no. There's also goggles, aren't there? You can that the B-52 crews wear
Yeah.
that are supposed to protect
I-
them. No provision at
if
all.
there are, I have never seen them and never even heard about them. All we heard about, but also actually never held them in our hands, were these pirate eye patches from the F-104 days.
Yeah. Tell me a little.
I think pretty much everybody knew that if this mission, if you get an execute signal for this mission, okay, that's the beginning of Armageddon, and it just doesn't matter anymore. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the MW weapon system? Then you just described how it was different from JP233. Again, one of the episodes I just put out a clip actually was on JP233, and it's interesting. People talk about the impracticality of that weapon. I think there's a view that it was to blame for the RAF's low level tornado losses in the early days of Desert Storm. I think that's statistically incorrect. I think actually they only lost one aeroplane on a JP233 run. The others were low level toss attacks where
To my knowledge, they didn't lose that jet on the run itself. The run was already successfully over, and he got shot down in the egress.
Yeah.
So actually, it worked as advertised.
So did you have that view then of the same? I mean, obviously you're talking about early mid 90s when you're getting to the tornado. Desert Storm happened in 91, so there's 3 or 4 years of information coming out, presumably being shared by the RAF with you guys as tornado operators. Were you looking at that weapon system and thinking it will be effective? One of the comments I got in the clip that I put out recently was that the Iraqis would take hoses and they would just hose off the submunitions from the runway. So that dealt with those quite nicely. I think someone had said that there's a shape charge. The idea is you bring along a bulldozer, you fix your runway with your bulldozer. The shape charge is designed to blow, the charge is designed to topple towards the bulldozer, fire through the bait or whatever it's called, and then kill the operator. But if you hose everything down, then that means that none of those things are relevant anymore. Did you look at the MW system and think, well, that it's going to work? It's a practical solution.
I actually thought that it was a very good weapon, and we had 5 different versions of it. We had it was supposed to work against 2 different target sets. It was supposed to work for interdiction against armor mainly, and it was supposed to work against airfields. So you had submunition loads full of shaped charges in the neighborhood of 4,700 in one NW1 to work against armor columns. Then you had a load that consisted of what we called Stabo, Startbahnbombe, runway bomb in English, which is comparable to Durandal from the Americans. So it is basically rocket propelled through the concrete, and then once it's through the concrete, it creates a crater below. So we actually only have a fairly small hole in the surface of the runway, but a huge hole under it. So the idea being, if an aircraft taxis over it, then the thing will just collapse. And the 3 other loads were mines, either a pure load of mines, or the other 2 were 2 mixes of different types of mines, some being active and some being passive with a time delay. So the whole idea being, if we are talking airfields, to prevent aircraft from taking off, at least for a certain amount of time. And usually you did not only crater the runway with those weapons, but you always use them in conjunction with the mines. So you crater the runway and then laid a carpet of mines over it to prevent people from clearing the runway and then repairing the runway. But obviously, smart people come up with ideas like the one you described with the fire hose and so forth. So to sum that up, one is getting a wrong idea if he thinks you fly whatever big formation of attackers for one attack across an airfield, and that's the end of that story. I don't know if you're familiar with JMAM, the Joint Munitions Effectiveness Manual. There is an own JMAM dedicated to MW1. It's like this thick, and it describes how you would sequence attacks to achieve certain damages. And just to get an idea, if you want to take an aircraft out of service, then basically you will perform probably every 4 to 6 hours an attack like that.
Really?
To continuously prevent it from being used. So it's not sufficient to do this once, because it's probably a matter of 2-3 hours, and then that thing will be repaired. We had in the German Air Force, we had a unit, and they were called Pioneers, and they were having all kinds of heavy duty machinery, so they could fill up these craters that such munitions produce with a fast hardening cement. So within like an hour or two, they would make a runway reusable.
Mm.
So this is very a very intense business that eats up a lot of your assets. If you want to do that properly, and this is only talking about like the mechanics of it. Obviously, it's easy to imagine that this is a very high risk, a very high risk operation, and we practice this day in, day out, and on operations like TLP. That was our standard at that time when I was there. All changed in the 2000s, but at the time I was there, that was our main weapon system, and we almost used it every day. And we were obviously tasked against defended sites. Like I don't know if you're familiar with the polygon range in southwest of Germany and into France, where they have not only threat emitters, but also live systems, like on the Nellis ranges, but obviously to a smaller degree.
If you enjoyed this clip and want more, you can go to 10percenttrue.com, hit subscribe, you get early ad-free access to all my content. Appreciate your support.